Welcome to the Bookly Podcast, and we're going to try something completely new today. We are going to start doing some episode trailers, I think you could call them. I don't know, short clips, short reviews, whatever you want to call them. We're going to try to pump some of those out, maybe drive a little bit of viewers to the podcast, and also maybe do some reviews where people can watch in a short amount of time, 3 to 5 minutes, if you want to just kind of get the gist of the book and want to learn more about what we're reading here on the Bookly Podcast. So while you're here, make sure that you like this video, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications so that you will be notified next time we drop an episode, and also leave us a comment. Let us know what episode you want us to do a trailer for next. I decided to start off with one of my, not favorite books, but one of my favorite episodes of the podcast, which was Empire of the Summer Moon by S.C. Gwynne. I think I said his name correctly. I probably didn't, though. And if you are anything like me, you probably have heard about this book from Joe Rogan, because I think that's where everybody heard about this book.
Look at that, ladies and gentlemen. It's a fantastic book.
And let me tell you, he was right. This book is brutal. So if you're looking for a brutal history of the Comanche Indians, this is it. And I'd also like to say that it's not just brutal from the perspective of the Indians, and also not just brutal from the perspective of the kind of westward explorers, expansionists, whatever you want to call them. It was brutal. It was brutal all around. People were dying. It was crazy. And according to the author, he left some stuff out to make it a little bit more palatable, which is crazy because some of the stories in this book were horrific.
It was a savage place. Anyway, I was trying to convey it with this, with the minimum possible of people being stanked out on ant hills with their eyelids cut off and things like that.
That being said, well worth the read. I think that anything with Native American history is worth reading, especially as an American. I think it's good to understand who was here before us, what transpired, and just have an appreciation for this land. We live in one of the greatest countries on earth. It is one of the most beautiful countries on the planet. And regardless of how you feel, I guess, politically or historically, we're here. That's the bottom line. We live here now. And the worst thing that I think we can not pull away from history is just a great appreciation for this land. And I think that comes with also understanding the history of this land. So this was perfect in that regards. I learned so much about Native Americans, specifically the Comanches, but there are other surrounding tribes that it also talks about, and also the history of kind of that fall of the Comanche Indians. And it was a really, really entertaining read for something that is history. I don't know. Sometimes I have a hard time getting into history books. I find them, a little bit too textbook-like. And this book was not like that at all. This book was very story-driven, which is awesome because I think most people learn really well with stories. And because it follows a few specific Comanches with Quanah Parker and, the Parker family all the way through towards the end of kind of the wild Comanche reign, I think is what I would call it, across the plains, then it makes it very entertaining. And so that's what I would call this book all in all. I would call it a very entertaining read. And I think Goodreads would agree with me. On Goodreads, it has a 4.23 rating overall, and that is out of 53, almost 54,000 ratings as of right now while I'm making this video. So that's a ton of people that have read this book and a ton of people that have really, really enjoyed it. A 4.23 rating on Goodreads is pretty good. I'm not the biggest fan of Goodreads in general, so if you've ever watched the podcast, you'll know it's not my favorite platform, but I do go to it just to get a good general feel about how other people feel about this book. And all in all, I would say the reviews were pretty positive. There were people who enjoyed it. There were a lot of people who commented on the historical accuracy of the book. There were a lot of people who also said that it may have been a little bit derogatory towards Native Americans, because it does kind of cover some of the darker sides and darker moments in history of the Comanche Indians.
We all know that a lot of horrific things happened.
And it doesn't pull any punches. So there were some nasty things that were done by the Comanches. But likewise, the book doesn't pull any punches when talking about some of the nasty things that settlers and westward expansionists did to the Comanches. So all in all, I think it was just kind of a gruesome battle on both sides. And I don't think that the book ever felt like it was picking a side. It really remained pretty impartial, which I really appreciated. I didn't really want to hear his narrative on whether he thought things were good or bad. What I wanted to hear was a history of what actually happened. And that's what I feel like this book accomplished and really gave me a better understanding of why the U.S. should feel bad for the way that we treated Native Americans when all said and done. When the dust settled, there was a lot of mistreatment of Native Americans, failed promises, and just overall terrible things that were done after the battles were finished. And so it gave me a better understanding of that, and I really appreciated that because it was a part of history that I didn't know a whole lot about. Now, in the episode for the podcast, I have Adam on the podcast. He's my brother. He does have, although not a great insight into the history of Native Americans, it is something that really fascinates him. He's read quite a few books on it. I know that he's read like American Buffalo. He's read a couple other books about Native Americans in general, and he's visited a lot of other, Native American sites. He's been to museums. He's a lot more educated than I am on the subject. And so it was interesting talking to him, getting his perspective, and it was a really fun episode. It was one of my favorite episodes, again, that I've done because it was one of the episodes that I felt like I learned the most. And that's really what this podcast is all about, is learning more. So if you want to hear more about what I thought about the book, some of my favorite parts about the book, highlights, what I didn't like about the book, just overall impressions, make sure to check out this episode of the podcast, where we really dive into the whole book. I think it's like an hour 40 long. You can listen to the whole thing. You can listen to parts of it, but definitely check it out. If you are interested in learning what books are going to come up on the Bookly podcast, check out our reading list for 2024 and definitely read along with us. We're excited to have all of the new readers with us, or if you don't have time to read, just check out the podcast. Learn about books without actually reading them and learn what parts I liked, what parts I didn't like, and maybe find out a book or two that you want to read this year. That's the goal of the podcast. Let's help people read more and also find books that you want to read. So thanks for following along. Again, make sure to comment and subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you next time.